Good afternoon, traders. This is Christian from Hertz Tribeca Trade Group, and this is your end of day market recap for Wednesday, August 4th. Risk disclaimer in front of you. Everything that we're going through here is for information purposes only, not giving out any advice or recommendations. Everything that we're going through here is for education purposes only. Also, if the screen is a little bit blurry on this video, just give it a little bit more time. YouTube takes a long time to render these videos. All right, so let's get into today's price action, and we'll talk about the market breadth today, which stunk up the place again. Not the best look for today, but you know high growth kind of saved the day. If you were positioned in some of those names, we'll talk about what we talked about in the pre-market session. Whoops, this is the wrong screen. Sorry about that. But just to kind of look at these numbers, just to look at the high level. If you're new to watching these videos, I usually kind of go over the high level stuff first. A little bit of macro review, index review in the first 5 or so minutes, and then we kind of get into the nitty gritty single stock review. But 28 decliners in the Dow. Still didn't really, the new lows, no 52-week new lows. Even for I don't know how this makes sense, but there were more 13. There was more percentage. Sorry, new 4-week highs versus lows. Sorry, I'm just trying to understand how that happened. Maybe because of intraday moves. Tough to do to have more 4-week new highs greater than the lows when you only have two advancing names. So I don't know. That's odd to me. S&P 382 declining decliners versus 121 advancing names. That's also not so good, and in the Nasdaq, same type of pattern there, 1902 versus 991. So that's kind of the story. What I see, I tweeted out yesterday talking about looking at some things like the advanced decline line, the McClellan summation index. And I had a lot of questions about that. And basically, it's measuring advancing versus declining, and then kind of looking at the pattern of that and putting like an MACD. But you could look at this similarly with the advanced decline line for NYSE stocks. It looks like it's been trying to get a little bit better and trying to get back over that 50-day moving average, which would be a positive development. And you could look at that. That's on stock charts. That's NYSI. I don't have that up in front of me, but if you want to go through, let's see if I have this here. I guess I could bring it up from last night, but here's the chart because this only updates. I don't think this is updated yet for the day, but yeah, I'm kind of looking for breath to pick up here a little bit, and you could see that the red line has kind of stopped going down. People ask me. A lot of people, rather than Googling what this is, they asked me to explain that to them. Well, again, it's a summation index that looks at advancing versus declining. So if it starts to tick back up again, right, it means that we have more advancing names, and the analogy always that I use is that the wind is at our back when we have an easier market environment. When you have more names advancing versus declining, right? It's a lot easier to be a stock picker, even if you're a lousy stock picker. If the market is advancing, odds are you're going to do better, right? Or if it has more advancing names than declining names. So, that wasn't the case today with the numbers that I just went over. However, there were some things like I was just talking about this at the close today. But if you look at the if you look at the what the ARK fund did today, which was up about 2.5% today, right? There was a lot of things that did particularly well in here, and it kind of reminds me, this portfolio does do well when you have bonds rally and rates go down, and it also just seems to be a little bit more geared towards stocks that are a little bit better stay-at-home stocks too. So, trading stocks, right? Robinhood. So I don't know if that's. I didn't even think about that until now because a lot of people are searching for reasons why Robinhood is up today, and we could talk a little bit about that stock. But a lot of people are calling it a meme stock, and it's most highly mentioned now. But yeah, I think it's also some institutional buying that's going on too, and it's kind of interesting, right? Everybody got pretty negative, including myself. This name, I said I wasn't going to buy this name, but it is what it is, right? They have a niche, and there's no options, right? But I think what's pretty funny about this is how many incorrect things are on these message boards, right? That you can't have a short squeeze in this name, so everybody's like scratching their head today seeing this name go up. It's a buy squeeze, and believe it or not, that's what we saw in a lot of, if you want to use that phrase of meme stocks. But that's, believe it or not, like all these message boards were combing through names for high short interest, but a lot of it has been, believe it or not, buy squeezes, right? Because there's no there's no squeeze in this because you can't short the name yet, right? That's another thing that's incorrectly on message boards. People thinking every time you can't do something, people are like, oh, the market's rigged, right? Well, you have to wait in any IPO, not just the Robinhood IPO, right? You have to wait a certain amount of time before some shares become available to short, right? So it's not, the market's not rigged, right? Just because you don't like that. It's just how an IPO works. It takes a little bit of time before brokers will start approving shares to be lent, right? There was also no gamma move this morning, right? That's another thing that you hear about a lot, right? Because they didn't have options till today. So it's kind of it's interesting, I think, for new investors to kind of learn some of these things rather than taking verbatim what they see on message boards, right? Just because someone is confident in what they're saying, or sound or has conviction, it doesn't mean that they're right at all. So please do your independent investigation on any of these things, because you start to put the pieces of these things together when you have a name that doesn't have any short interest right now, that also didn't have any options till today, and it's a buy squeeze, right? And some it's so anyway, that's my interpretation of that. Let's talk a little bit more about the overall market, and we'll talk about what we did today. Blockchain stocks also up today. Biotech was an outperformer today. That was up 1.6% for the day. So there's definitely some bright spots, to the market. And the Nasdaq was up today, not by a lot, but about 15 basis points. Just zoom this in just a hair. So you could probably see these things. The small caps were where the problem areas was, again, down 1.2% for the day. Bonds were kind of all over the place today. We had some really good economics that kind of got lost in the shuffle today. Keep in mind we had the ADP number, which the ADP number, which we talked about pre-market, really means nothing in terms of significance, because sometimes they're right with this gauge, sometimes they're completely wrong. Right, so the real number comes out on Friday. That's the true number. That's the one that everybody looks at. As long as I've been on Wall Street I've known this ADP number to be completely, it is wrong a lot. Sometimes it's right, sometimes it's wrong, but there's no significance of whether or not that this number will show a weak report on Friday. But look at what did come in very strong. The ISM number. This was a record high, I believe, right, for ISM services. So again, some things you get right now in the economics are showing a little bit of weakness. Some things are showing really big strength. Right, and this gauge was very strong. What didn't do well today? By the way, software names were very strong today too. Right, so again, a lot of growth. Right, and again, it reminds me, which we'll get into, of the stay-at-home type trade. But look at what the energy stocks did today. OIH was down 6%. Right? Doesn't this seem vaguely similar to what happened in 2020? Metals and mining names were also down after showing some strength over the last week. Steel names were down 1.3%. GDX ended up being down for the day. And gold as well sold off early strength. Really tricky gold. I'm not really doing anything there. Value names were down 1% for the day. And again, like I said, the ARK Innovation Fund was very strong. So, what did we do in the trading room today? Well, we kind of set this up this morning as as what I thought would do very well today, which I thought Zoom would do very well. Right, we're hearing more about the Delta variant. We're hearing a lot of companies talk about how they have to backpedal in terms of announcing everybody going back to work. Well, now it's not so fast. Right, so here's one of the things, and this was what I talked about this morning. Right, was that right here was I put I knew that this name had to do some work. This name started in value. I'll look at the chart in just a second, but I said the same thing here, right? Eight o'clock this morning. There may be a trade here in Zoom again. Remember, this name also had this deal of FIVN, about 2 weeks ago now? And when you have a big deal announced like that, right, I got asked about Zoom like right after the deal, and I said, give it some time. Once a big deal is announced, the name kind of becomes dead money for a little bit. Sometimes it's a couple days, sometimes it's a couple weeks. But now I thought enough time has gone by that people have had a chance to let that deal kind of digest a little bit. But here's what I'm talking about. During the day, Zoom started inside value, so I knew it needed to get through value, which it did quite nicely. It's not easy for a stock to do that, but real nice move, and I'm still sitting long some of this name. I think it could continue to go upwards here. Again, as long as we're hearing about the Delta variant and issues with some of the vaccines, right? I mean, that's something that I heard this morning, that this efficacy rate, the more that we're learning, is that the efficacy rate is lower and lower for the Moderna and Pfizer vaccines. So could be another booster shot that we get. I'm not getting into that side of the. I'm just talking about what we know and how to trade off of that. So if companies are backpedaling on reopening, certainly they're going to be using Zoom more. I know no one likes that because it's tough to be on Zoom calls all day. But this is just a trade, right? And that's basically how it works. And it's now kind of looking like a little bit of an inverted head and shoulders. So I'm still long that name. That was a big name for me today, as I bought some pre-market and then I bought more. Once we got to the open and it looked like it was going in the right direction, and I started taking targets where I thought we might hit a little bit of resistance. One other name that I broke down pre-market, which kind of didn't get off to the best start, but ended up working out, was Microsoft. Right, and again, you're seeing this just digestion after earnings. And I love that, right? After like a decent report for Microsoft, but obviously it ran into the report, a lot of these names are kind of digesting a little bit. Facebook finally had the first nice green bar, although this is still in value and not as an attractive as a setup for me because it's got to get over 362. But you're starting to see these names kind of come back, some of them after they've had earnings. HCNP, this was a name that I loved. A couple of weeks ago, had a real nice earnings report, gap up. I would be a buyer if this thing kind of comes in and fills the gap, or at least kind of comes in halfway. But I talked about how this, I sold mine pre-earnings, but it came in and, gave a nice little cute move back to the top of value. But still, just don't know what a name is going to do on earnings. I didn't want that risk, but those who held on to it got rewarded for that today. Some other names that I think are interesting. Shop was another name that we talked about. Again, had good earnings, but just ran into the earnings report, right? We see this over and over, right, on earnings. A lot of the momentum names, people want to buy them before, right? We talk about that principle all the time. Buy the rumor, sell the news, and you could see what happened here in Shop, and now it looks attractive, right? After going a little bit too far, coming back in, looks pretty good. TTD is another one. Right, that's this one has earnings. It's tough. A lot of these names, that the chart looks pretty good, have earnings in front of them. Tandem was another name that I was looking at yesterday. Had a real nice move. Back checking into the top of value, but had earnings, and I think the earnings are pretty good. So this will be one to kind of watch. But yeah, I mean, there's so many names that that haven't really blinked, right, in terms of earnings. Like this FTNT is a good example of that. it's just amazing. Some of these names just have just kept going or even accelerated to the upside. Look at what Carrier finally is down a little bit today, but look at the performance in Carrier, right? Heated going into earnings, and ASML, right, is another one too. Did a little bit of digestion before earnings, and bang, off to the off to the races. Other things that I thought were interesting today is the semis are breaking out. So again, I think the overall tape, and while I don't like this negative breath, I don't know. It just kind of feels like there's some things that are showing some really nice strength, and the leaders are leading right now, or the leaders are kind of coming to the front, and there's a lot of other areas that are very choppy right now, and they're tough. You can't chase the choppy names, right? I was talking about yesterday, like the industrials are trying to turn the corner, but you cannot chase a green day in the industrials, right? You can't chase a green day in the banks, even though I bought a little bit of GS today, and then I just decided to dump it, at the end of the day. These things are too hard right now. So if they're too hard, there's adjustments to be made. Only take small positions in the names that are too difficult. And you got to be careful about chasing the names that are too choppy. All right. So that's kind of my quick market thoughts for the day. But, I think there's plenty of opportunities. And, I think there's plenty of opportunities if you're looking in the right places, right? And if you're understanding like how this tape is going to work in terms of where people are putting their money when you start to hear about the Delta variant ticking up, and if this is a temporary issue, which I hope it is, right? There's certain areas around the globe that it's proved to be a bit temporary when they have the vaccine. So you kind of have to be on your toes for this stuff. If we start to hear that the numbers in the U.S. are peaking and starting to go back down, right? Then the cyclical reopening trade is back on. So you could buy the dip in some of those names that have been beaten up. But I think you have to wait for that information a little bit to come out. But again, we try to have this plan and go over this in the TTG pre-market session every day at 9 o'clock, right? So I'll give a little bit of a plug here, which I do probably about once a week. Is that if you're not a member of Tribeca Trade Group and you have some time on your hands to trade and listen to pre-market commentary at 9 o'clock in the morning, give us a look to see if we add value to your trading plan. All right, so that's it for today's video. Again, nice green day for me P&L wise. We had some nice plays, and I always like that when the market's down for the most part and P&L is up for the day. All right, guys, have a great night, and we'll see you tomorrow.